Hi everyone, my name is Leela Sinha and this is an Impolite Conversation. Today what I want to talk about is the difference between punitive and supportive power. So the difference between punitive and supportive power, because I think, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I really think that this is where a lot of everything gets kind of tied up and stuck. So where do I want to start? Let's start with my squirrels. So I moved into an apartment, a new apartment, and my dining room window looks out over some kind of low, scrubby trees. And that's great environment for small birds, for songbirds, I have some scrub jays because I'm in California, and also squirrels, because squirrels. Now, most people who feed birds do not approve of squirrels. Why don't they approve of squirrels? Because squirrels go through birdseed like you wouldn't believe. I buy big bags of birdseed, and the small birds, just kind of chow down a little at a time. But a squirrel will actually sit on the windowsill and eat 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 and go away and come back in like 2 hours and eat and eat and eat, right? So you have to decide if you're going to feed the squirrels or not. But I decided that there was no getting around them in this particular environment. The way that my particular setup is, there's not really a way to keep the squirrels away. And so the best strategy is really just to plan to feed them too. And so I put out peanuts and I put out birdseed, and the squirrels eat some of this and some of that. But when the squirrels run out of birdseed, and they're still hungry, because sometimes they run out and they're not hungry, they just go away. But when the squirrels run out of birdseed and they're still hungry, they go over to I have a little tiny plastic suction cup bird feeder on my window, and it cannot support the weight of a squirrel. And it's just about at reaching height for the squirrel, like they'll be able to reach up and So when they're running out of birdseed and they're still hungry, they'll go over to the bird feeder and they'll just kind of grab it and shake it. And they're actually trying to get into it, but they also know now that if I hear them and I'm home, usually I'll just come and put a little more seed on the sill so that they can get to it and so they don't break my bird feeder. Because that's the other problem with squirrels, right? Not only will they eat the seed, but they will destroy a bird feeder if the bird feeder is not designed for squirrels. So I'll go over and I'll kind of snap my fingers at them or do something to distract them, do something to get them to get down. I'm not trying to scare them. I'm just trying to let them know that I heard them and that yes, okay, you need more seeds, I'll deal with that. And this weird kind of relationship between me and the squirrels has got me thinking about the various ways that we exercise our power, right? Because some people, confronted with a squirrel who wants birdseed or peanuts or whatever, will make an obstacle course. I'm sure you've seen those videos go viral of the people who have these elaborate obstacle courses, and that's, kind of entertainment. It's what they would call in animal care, they would call it enrichment, right? So there's that. There's the option of I'll just do that thing, right? They'll just be like a game between me and the squirrels will come and I will do my best to both entertain and delay their consumption of some of this food. And that becomes like a thing back and forth between the person and the squirrel or the person and the squirrels. Sometimes people get really punitive. People do things that really harm the squirrels or that have a negative effect on the squirrels in an ongoing way because they're mad at the squirrels and they decide they're going to punish the squirrels for trying to eat. That doesn't seem fair to me. I understand that that's not what you planned. You wanted to feed the birds and not the squirrels, but it doesn't seem fair to me that you would punish a squirrel for just being a squirrel. Hungry squirrel finds food, wants food. And so if you're doing something that's actually damaging or harmful to the squirrels, that's concerning. Some people figure out ways to discourage the squirrels, all those squirrel baffles and whatnot, or, things that are inaccessible to the squirrels. That doesn't really bother me. Or if you have it turns out that squirrels can taste the hot in hot peppers and birds can't. So I have a suet cake and it has capsaicin in it, and so it's not interesting to the squirrels because it doesn't taste good to them. Again, discouraging them by having something they don't want. That works. But I started to think about the ways in which people are punitive with their power, the ways in which people try to use their power to actually harm someone else or cause unhappiness or cause pain, cause discomfort, which is kind of anathema to the entire way that I operate, right? My business and my coaching are about moving everyone toward a system where they can have more pleasure and less pain, which I have been known to say over and over again is the most basic of basic animal instincts: toward pleasure, away from pain. Toward pleasure, away from pain. Anything that an animal does is essentially toward pleasure and away from pain, until we get into humans and like asceticism and the idea that you can be a better person with more suffering. And I'm not sure I understand that. Also, a lot of the brain research at this point shows us that too much continuous suffering actually changes the way your brain operates in a not great way. So I'm aware of that. I'm mindful of that. And I'm also just generally, I think there's too much misery in the world, and I would like to reduce the amount of misery in the world. And so that's the basis for everything that I do, is the idea that there should be less misery in the world and more pleasure. So back to the squirrels. What is it that makes people want to be punitive when you have power? What is it that makes someone want to be punitive about it? Because there's punitive power and then there's supportive power, right? So punitive power is like, I'm going to get you. I'm going to cause you discomfort. I'm going to cause you pain. I'm going to cause more misery for you because I have decided you deserve it and I have the power to do something with that decision. But the other way to use power is supportive power, is to say, okay, I'm going to help something good happen. I'm going to help you make a different decision. I'm going to encourage you toward a different decision. I'm going to support you in being a better person. I'm going, whatever it is. And while the question of what is a better person, right, that's a very subjective judgment, and all of that is a minefield for another video. But the way that people choose to either move toward essentially vengeance or support, and restoration or development or restoration of a relationship is really key to all of this fear around power. So when good people are afraid of becoming bad people because they're afraid that having power is going to make them into a bad person. That thing goes around a lot, right? This idea that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that there's not really a way around it. So if you want to stay uncorrupted, if you want to stay pure, if you want to stay good, then you're just going to stay away from power because power is a corrupting influence. And that kind of sees it as irrefutably just that, in the same way that you might say that, iron rusts. And so iron shouldn't come into contact with, water or salt or any of the things that encourage that rusting process to start, because once it starts, it's all over, game over. You might as well just give up, unless you're going to do one of those, 3-hour time-lapse processes or 25-hour or week-long time-lapse processes where you scrub the knife off and then you grind it down, and then, there's some phenomenal videos of people restoring high-quality knives. Anyway, again, not that. But this idea that power is this super intense, corrupting, kind of incontrovertible force is really challenging, especially if you want to do anything or be effective at pretty much anything. And so what do you do? What do you do? How do you do this? Well, this thing, like fear and anger, are very close to each other as emotions, right? And this thing of I'm either afraid or angry or both, and so I have to do something with it. And what am I going to do to clear that out of my body? I'm going to strike out. And who can I strike out against? Someone who has less power than I do. Right? That's a very primal instinct. It doesn't make you a bad person. to have that instinct. But what you choose to do with it is the question. And so we have this question of like vindictiveness and retribution versus restoration. And fear doesn't feel good either. So sometimes it becomes like, you made me feel afraid. That was an unpleasant feeling. I'm going to make you feel an unpleasant feeling now. And again, very, very primal, very basic. Doesn't make you a bad person to have that impulse. And what are you going to do with it? Because if you are the power holder, if you have somebody in your environment, in your orbit, in your close circle, in proximity to you, if you have somebody that you can exercise that power against, the question of whether you choose to is the one of goodness. The question of whether you choose to is the question of goodness. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is everybody has moments where they want to create balance for something that they suffered through. Everyone does. But what that balance is and how you achieve it, or what that balance is and how you decide not to pursue it, is the key. That's the critical part. So, what do we do from here? The thing is that if you've got power, it is morally incumbent upon you to continually ask yourself whether you are using that power well. And that's such a big question, right? It's such a big kind of moral inquiry. I believe that you can't always engage that moral inquiry by yourself. Sometimes you need people. Sometimes you can do it on your own. But sometimes you need people around you who hold similar values and are making similar inquiries so that you can support each other in using your power in supportive ways. So with my squirrels, my choice to use my power, like I could be mean to the squirrels, but my choice is to use my power to make sure that they have some peanuts. It literally does not cost me very much money, time, energy to give the squirrels some peanuts. And then they're happy, and then they go away and they don't eat the bird seed that's in the bird feeder that I intended for the birds. If they want bird seed, I'll put a little bird seed on the sill too. Because what I can do is use my power to make their lives a little better, to make their lives a little easier. They're living in interaction with humans anyway. So it's not like, I'm interfering with their wild habits. These are suburban squirrels, urban squirrels. They live in and among people. They do rely on people for food. And so how can I participate in that in a way that's supportive and that doesn't hurt them? And that's the question, right? How can you participate in having power in a way that's supportive and doesn't hurt people? That's all. That's the whole goal. That's the whole goal, is to be able to use power to make the world a better place. And a lot of this goes to who is redeemable, right? Because when we start to think about vindictiveness versus restoration, the question at the heart of that is there a way to develop or restore a relationship? Is there a way redeem this person, this situation? Is there a way to come to a resolution that will do some good? Can we get some good out of this? Something bad happened. Can we get some good out of it? Or nothing bad has happened yet, and I'm just upset. Can I make this better? Can I improve this somehow? And so the question I want to leave you with is, what keeps you out of punitive mode, or what helps you move out of punitive mode? If you get into a situation where you're just livid, what allows you to take your anger and direct it somewhere useful? Because anger is also a form of power. It's a way that power rises up. What allows you to direct that anger toward something supportive? And I'm not saying you always have to support the person you're angry at. Sometimes that's totally not appropriate. And I'm not saying that you always have to want to restore or redeem your relationship with the person or institution or situation that you're angry at. That's sometimes not the right choice. But when you make a choice about how you're going to use your power, the ultimate question is, are you trying to punish someone? Are you trying to cause discomfort and misery and unhappiness? Or are you trying to do something good? And if you think that deliberately causing discomfort and misery and unhappiness, I don't mean this person is uncomfortable as a side effect of something else that's useful. I mean, if your goal is to cause discomfort or misery or unhappiness for someone, why? Why? Because that's the thing. That's the chink in the armor that allows corruption to happen. So I leave you with that. Thank you for joining me. Subscribe, like, do all those things down there, and I'll see you next time.